Earlier today, Six Flags made their official announcements for what they'll be adding at every single Six Flags park next year. And if you saw my predictions video, then you know that I was anticipating a lot of these attractions. And none of the attractions that we saw announced really surprised me, with the exception of one. Six Flags Magic Mountain restoring the Revolution. Everyone always said that they wanted it to happen, but I wasn't actually expecting them to actually do that. It just didn't seem like something that Six Flags would actually do, but I'm really happy that they are doing it. Other than that, I wasn't surprised about any of the other additions. But actually what I'm going to be doing in this video is discussing my overall thoughts on all of these additions, but I will not go too much in depth with the new roller coasters, which is Total Mayhem and the Joker. And the reason for that is because I'll be posting an individual coaster analysis for the Joker and for Total Mayhem. So for those I'll go a little bit more in depth. So in this video I'm going to try and focus on all of the other additions. Let's start with the Justice League Battle for Metropolis Dark Rides. We're seeing one at Great America and Six Flags Mexico next year, which everyone was expecting to go to Great America. They were doing tons of teasing, and it wasn't really that surprising. And I think it'll be a good fit for Six Flags Mexico too. If you've noticed, Six Flags Mexico has received some large rides 4 years in a row. That's a lot more than some of the other Six Flags parks. I think what Six Flags is trying to do is really improve that park. They're trying to make it the park to go to in Mexico. And from the looks of things, I think it's working. When speaking of Great America, they'll be putting it in the location of where the Southwest Amphitheater was, which I think is interesting that they chose that location since they have the Pictorium building, which is right next to some other DC themed rides. So I am curious as to why they chose to construct a new building when they have a current building already there. Let's talk about all of the super loops. We're seeing one at Six Flags St. Louis, Six Flags New England, Six Flags Fiesta Texas, and The Great Escape. That is 4 new parks getting a super loop. That is the same number as last year. Last year we saw Six Flags America, Great Adventure, Discovery Kingdom, and over Georgia get a super loop. So if you ask me, what it looks like what Six Flags is doing is they're trying to put in a super loop at every single Six Flags park. And so they're doing them 4 at a time. So if they keep up this pattern, then I think you can expect to see one at all of the parks that haven't gotten one yet. That means over Texas, Ronde, Mexico, and Magic Mountain. And if Magic Mountain gets it, then that means that would be their 20th roller coaster, because Six Flags loves to call them roller coasters. Although this time, they didn't call all of them roller coasters. They only called a couple of them coasters, which is somewhat good. At least they didn't call all of them roller coasters. I think Six Flags somewhat acknowledges that they're not roller coasters. At least it seems that way. Now some of these parks aren't just receiving a super loop. Like Six Flags New England is also bringing back Superman. As you know, Bizarro used to be called Superman Ride of Steel. And a lot of people weren't crazy about the transformation to Bizarro because it gave it new trains, and a lot of people did not like the new trains because it ruined the experience. So it's interesting that they're bringing back Superman after a couple of years of calling it Bizarro. And actually, they aren't calling it Superman Ride of Steel anymore. They're calling it Superman The Ride, which I think is an interesting change. And Six Flags Fiesta Texas also is not just receiving a super loop. And the names of those 2 rides are Spinsanity and Hurricane Force 5. And Hurricane Force 5 is actually a Zamperla Disco, which I think those are always good additions, so I like that they're adding that. Six Flags America is expanding their water park with the addition of a new water play structure, which is a replacement to their old play structure that they tore down. And everyone was anticipating this, so this isn't really surprising at all. Six Flags Over Texas is receiving 3 new rides, although it's actually really only 2 rides. They're just renaming and repainting one of them, but they are receiving 2 new attractions, and the highlight of that is a new Frisbee, which is called Riddler's Revenge, because we know that Six Flags doesn't like to trademark new names, and they already have that trademark for the coaster in California, so why not reuse it on a flat ride? And a lot of people were complaining that Six Flags Over Texas is going another year without a new roller coaster, but I think that this new flat ride is a good addition. Let me touch on the Joker. Like I said, I'm not going to go too in depth with it, but I like what they did with the color scheme, having one rail be green and the other one purple. And I think it's interesting that they didn't go with a name that uses the name Roar in it. It's almost like they're completely disregarding its name. Otherwise, like some coasters, Wicked Cyclone, Twisted Colossus. This is a completely new theme. Although even though I like the color scheme of the rails, I think it's interesting that it goes with the brown wood. I think it would have gone better had the wood been white or dare I say, black. Of course, Six Flags wouldn't repaint the wood, but I'm not crazy about how it looks against the brown wood. That being said, it is just an animation, so hopefully it'll look better in person. What Six Flags Over Georgia is doing is revamping their kids area. We're seeing 12 new rides, although not all of them are actually new. They're retheming a lot of them because one of their new areas is called DC's Super Friends. So they're adding new attractions and retheming old attractions. Of course, DC Super Friends isn't just the new area, they're also pulling a Six Flags Over Texas and adding Bugs Bunny Boomtown. So they're really focusing on the kids' rides, although I did see some flying scooters in there, and those are great family attractions. Ronde is sending Les Vampires backwards, which is a popular thing that Six Flags has been doing. They're sending their Batman the Ride clone and putting it backwards. It just so happens that Ronde's isn't called Batman the Ride, it's called Les Vampires. And actually, something interesting, it doesn't talk about how long Les Vampires will run backwards. Typically, whenever one of these coasters runs backwards, it only runs backwards for half of the year. So it makes me wonder if another Six Flags park will run one of their Batman coasters backwards for the second half of the year, and they just haven't announced it yet. Now, Ronde will also be adding the Gravitor and the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is some flying scooters, and the Gravitor is some crazy family thrill ride or something. I gotta be honest, I actually haven't seen one of these things before, but it looks interesting, I'll give it that. And finally, we have Total Mayhem at Six Flags Great Adventure. A lot of people were expecting a larger version of Batman the Ride at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, but this is actually an exact clone of it. So that leads some people to be disappointed. Now that being said, I actually don't have a problem with this edition because this will be the first and only 4D roller coaster on the East Coast. The only other one is in Texas and in California. A lot of people really like this roller coaster. My main complaint is that it's a really short ride, so I understand why some people wanted a larger version. But I think the color scheme is really cool, but I also think that the area of the park where it's going in is good, because they really do need a major attraction in that section. But I'll talk more about that roller coaster in my analysis of it. So that is my breakdown for all of the new rides coming to Six Flags parks next year. We're seeing a good portion of family rides, 4 Super Loops, 2 Justice League Dark rides, 1 brand new roller coaster, and 1 RMC. So I want to hear from you what you think of all of these additions. Do you like them? Are you disappointed? I want to hear about it. Post your comments below. And if you're new to Coaster Studios, make sure to subscribe. And of course, stay tuned for those coaster analyses that I'll be doing of Total Mayhem and the Joker.